Hey Siri,
Uh-huh.
how many seconds are there in a day?
One day is 86,400 seconds.
We have 86,400 seconds each day. How many seconds do we spend thanking God? Thanking God is such an important thing, not just for acknowledging God, but for making our own hearts and our own minds healthy. See, I don't know about you, but for me, whenever I look in the mirror, I see the blemishes. Whenever I think about myself, I see my faults. When someone asks me, describe yourself, the first things coming to mind are the weaknesses that I'm working on rather than the strengths and victories that I've received. There's a really crazy story in the first part of John chapter 5, and it's about a man who was healed by the pool of Bethesda. See, the Bible says that there was a Jewish feast happening in Jerusalem at that time. And so there would be many people coming there at that time, and Jesus was there too. But then Jesus went out by the sheep's gate to a place called Bethesda, and there was a pool there with 5 porches, and that place was riddled with sick people. And not just people with the cold, people with the flu, but rather really debilitating sicknesses like people who were paralyzed, people who were blind, people who were lame. And here in this area, the Bible says that these people believed that the water would get stirred, and as the water gets stirred, the first one in the water would get healed. And so Jesus came to a man who had been here in this place for 38 years. Jesus comes to him and says, "Do you want to be made well?" And the man doesn't even say yes. It seems like this man's just lost all hope. It's not even possible. And so rather than answering the question about what he wants, he's just giving the reason why he hasn't been made well. And he says, look, I have no one to help me. So when the water gets moved and people start jumping into the water, I'm never the first one because there's no one here to help me. And even though he didn't ask Jesus for help, Jesus chooses to heal him anyway, and he commands him to stand up and walk. The Bible says he feels something that he hasn't felt for many, many, many years, for decades, and strength gets restored to his legs. And he gets up and he carries the bed and he's going back to Jerusalem. Now that to me is amazing, but that's not the crazy part about the story. See, the Bible tells us that that day was the Sabbath. And in verse 10, the Bible says, the Jews therefore said to him who was cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed." Now, this is where the whole story gets crazy for me. It's like, what, are you kidding me? This man has been unable to move for 38 years. Jesus has done this just mind-blowing miracle, and all of a sudden, here's this man carrying his bed. But when the Jews saw this, all they could see is, he's breaking the Sabbath. Put down that bed. Don't you know it's not lawful for you to carry that bed on the Sabbath? It's absolutely crazy to me to even fathom. How could they not celebrate God? How could they not see what God has done? And here they are concerned about him carrying something on the Sabbath. Now, I don't want to get into the theological accuracies or inaccuracies about carrying a bed on the Sabbath. What I do want to get into, the Jewish people were a faithful nation in the sense that they believed they were following God. Yet don't miss this. God had just done an amazing miracle, and they couldn't see the good that God had done because all they could see is what they believed was left for God to do. I don't know if this makes sense to you, but it makes sense to me. See, there are many things in my life that God has changed. If I reflect on the last 10 years of my life, I'm not the man that I was, and I say that in a good way. Yet so often it's hard for me to celebrate my life with Jesus because I'm crippled by only seeing what Jesus has left to do in me. See, I think that bad mindset is a result of me not taking enough time every single day intentionally thanking Jesus for what he's done. As we thank him Yes, we're giving him glory. Yes, he deserves it. Yes, it's the right thing to do. But it's not just for God, but rather it's primarily for us. Because as we spend time thanking God for what he's done, we are reminded of what he's done. And we no longer have to carry the burden of self-hate or self-shame or just utter disappointment in ourselves, but rather we can rejoice for what God has done. We have 86,400 seconds every day. How many of them are you going to use to thank God for what he's done?